Hello, DECA Ontario, and welcome to the 2016-2017 Google Hangout before the Provincials. Today we're going to be covering some of the important concepts which you're going to need to know going into the Provincials. Rishi is going to be going over some important tips and what you need to know. Then after we're going to be going over the role play and general advice, then the written events, then the exam, and finally we're going to be answering some questions. So my name is Venya Veslovsky. I'm your president, and right now we're going to be introducing ourselves.
Should I go?
My name is Ben Levy. I go to Thornhill Secondary, and I'm a chapter development officer.
My name's Rahul Batija. I go to John Fraser Secondary School, and I'm the other chapter development officer.
My name's Rishi Bensel. I go to Bayview Secondary School, and I'm your branding and communications officer.
Bing Jang, and I go to Bloor Collegiate, and I'm one of your events coordinators for this year.
Hi, I'm Lucy Chen, and I'm one of your other events coordinators for this year.
I'm Jessica. I go to Mark Arnault Collegiate Institute, and I am your media coordinator for this year.
Hey guys, my name's Anna Shin, and I'm your secretary.
Unfortunately, we're having some camera problems, a camera malfunction for Anna, and so her camera won't be turned on for this video. So Rishi, do you want to begin with important information and reminders?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so with our introductions out of the way, there's a bunch of information that you guys definitely want to remember going into provincials and some things that you don't want to forget. So of course, if you're staying overnight, remember to pack everything. Don't forget your socks, like your blazer, your tie, and everything that's going to make you look really nice when you're presenting to those judges on Friday. Remember to bring a photo ID, as our policy is no ID, no compete. And same way with that, remember to bring your DECA ID name badge, as that has all of the information as to when your award ceremonies are, when you're going to be presenting your oral or your written or whatever, and when your exam is too. So reminder for those in the hospitality or business admin core cluster, your exam is going to be taking place online either tomorrow or Tuesday. Your advisor will get to choose what date you guys are actually doing the exam on. So remember to check in with your advisor and make sure you know when you're doing your exam so you don't miss that. And that's really important. Remember to arrive early to your case or presentation time. So we may be running ahead, we may be running behind. That how that runs is going to depend on what's happening on competition day itself. But you definitely don't want to miss your presentation time, because if you miss it, then you won't be able to, or you won't be given a chance to make up for that. Furthermore, don't get a deduction or a penalty for something silly that you can avoid. So the first penalty that you could potentially get is a dress code infraction. So you don't want to be caught out of business formal. So that's like if you're not wearing a tie, if you have inappropriate pants, shoes, etc., etc. So all those things, just stay in business formal throughout the day. You don't want to be losing 10 points just because you weren't wearing business formal. The other type of infraction is a behavior infraction. So that's if you're breaking curfew. You guys are familiar with all this stuff. That's a 25-point deduction. So make sure that you're not getting that kind of deduction, because that definitely could mean the difference between going to ICDC and not being on stage. On top of that, the award ceremonies have assigned seating for sessions 2 and 3, but not for session 1. So make sure you know where you are. All of the assigned seating is going to be in the Provincials program, so make sure you're checking that. Remember, for session 1, it's blue lanyards only. For session 2, it's orange lanyards only. And for session 3, it's green and purple lanyards only. So if during the award ceremony you're called to go on stage, you're going to have to be in full business attire. If you're not in full business attire, you may only get your medal or plaque or whatever on the ground floor only. We won't let you up on stage. There's also going to be no chewing gum allowed on stage, so please make sure you're not doing that at Provincials. And if you make it to ICDC, you're going to be brought out into the foyer area, and you're going to be asked for verbal consent to confirm your intention to go to ICDC. And you really want to make sure that you are, you know whether or not you can go to ICDC, as a fee may follow if you confirm it and later back out or something like that. So make sure that you definitely know whether or not you are going to be able to go to ICDC if you do make it to ICDC. So that's all for general important information reminders. And I think Benny is going to take it away with the role play and general advice.
Yeah, before we get into that, do we have any more information or reminders from anybody else of executives that they might want to share? If not, I will begin. Oh, sorry.
For girls, make sure your skirt is long. We don't want point deductions if the skirt is too short, above your knee, or an inch above your knee.
Awesome.
Yeah, you also won't be allowed on stage if your skirt is way too short.
Same with guys in a tie. Guys, you need a tie if you want to go on stage. So now we're going to be getting into more of the role play aspect of your competition. And the role play could be the most important part when it comes to competition, because for team events, 50% of your score comes from the role play, and for the individual events, 2/3 of your score comes from the role play. The other third, or the other half, being from the exam itself. So for oral competitors, don't forget to give your judge the notes and the Scantron blue or black ink pen. And the Scantron blue or black ink pen are the only ones that are allowed. You bring your own paper, bring your Padfolio, and that's what it's for. You cannot bring in anything pre-prepared, otherwise you'll be disqualified. And if you know your judge, get out of there as soon as possible, otherwise your score could be nullified. Some other important parts about the role play is the performance indicators. So when it comes down to your role play, there are two main aspects that you should be analyzing. First of all, the content and how well you answer the performance indicators. And the performance indicators are important for your role play because they're essentially your guide. They're what you follow to successfully answer the question of your role play. And they're essentially the building blocks of your entire presentation. So if you look at it as a pyramid, the top being your goal, the bottom foundation is your performance indicators, and then the middle part is how you communicate those performance indicators. There are different ways that people approach performance indicators. However, here at DECA Ontario, a couple years ago, we developed the performance indicator model, which essentially is you first define what the performance indicator means, then you explain why it's important or relevant, then you connect it back to your case, and finally try to go above. And as you can see, that makes an acronym called DECA. So once again, the D is for define, E is for explain, C is for connect, and A is for above. And I guess a good way to illustrate this would be if we ourselves do an example of one performance indicator that we might get. So let's say we're given, state the nature of operations. Do any of the executives know? Can any of the executives define what the nature of operations are?
Yeah, sure. Should I go?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So basically operations is like the day-to-day management of a business in terms of, finance, marketing, and just the different ways that a company can run itself. And then I'd launch into an example, I'd say probably. So for example, let's look at Coke or something like that. Their day-to-day operations are very different depending on the different department that you're dealing with. So that could be developing products, that can be making sure that annual reports are made, that can be a wide variety of things, and that's essentially what operations is. And then keep connecting over.
Yeah, exactly. So what Rahul did there is he first defined what operations are. They are the day-to-day actions that a company takes. Afterwards, through the example, you can explain why it's important or relevant. Well, good operations are important so that we can effectively and efficiently run our business. Then after, with the C, you connect it to your solution. So if for example, you're Apple and lately you have seen that your operations have been going downhill, relate it back to how operations can, how you can connect it to that business itself. And finally, you can go above, and Lucy is going to be going over some visuals later on about how you can go above the competition, but above what other people are going to be doing. And I think Rahul right now is going to be getting into some presentation tips.
Yeah, so in terms of the presentation, from my personal experiences, I'd say that presentation is one of the most important things in the role play. The DECA PI model and the way that you structure role play is really important, because if you do not have a proper structure, then the judge won't be able to understand what you're saying. But at the same time, presenting really, really importantly is just as important, because if the judge zones out or if anything happens, the judge really will focus on how well you're speaking and the confidence that you have in your voice, the different tone that you have in your voice versus what you're actually saying. So in terms of the presentation tips, the main one is practice. I mean, the more you do, the more practice role plays that you do, the better you're going to become, of course. But then there's a couple of other things that you can do to make them better. I mean, obviously, if you practice, you can practice like alone, or you can practice with a real person. And then when you add that extra element of simulating, if your parents listen to you or if a sibling listens to you, then that takes you to another level because you're recreating the scene more than if you were practicing alone. But if those are not options that are available to you, then one of the things that you can do is you can record yourself or record a video of yourself doing the role play, and then after like 6 or 7 hours you can watch it again. And the reasoning behind that is that if you wait some time, then you'll see yourself doing the role play in a very unbiased perspective. And so all of those things, the hope is that they're just going to make you speak more confidently. Your tone is going to vary, and you're going to be able to actually go through the entire 7 to 8 minute presentation without saying a lot, without having all those different things that people will dock you marks for.
Awesome. So Rishi, do you want to go over how we can incorporate examples into the role play?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely incorporating industry examples is one of the best things that you can do in your role play, because it goes and shows the judge that, one, you know a little bit about the industry and the category that you're competing in. So if that's like food marketing, for example, then you know a little bit about the food industry, you know a little bit about supermarkets, etc. If you're in marketing, then you know like successful marketers, you know what things have been done before, and it proves and supports your point, so that the things that you're saying, or the promotional plan that you're trying to deliver, or the financial documentation that you're trying to put together, that there's a precedent for it and it's worked elsewhere, and you can take the same principles and apply them to your own case study and apply them to your own solutions. So for example, one of my favorites is that whenever I'm telling someone or advising someone on a hotel or hospitality case, is the Ritz-Carlton, and how they have the program where every employee is given up to $2,000 to deal with any one incident. And then there's a plethora of examples of what employees have done using that $2,000. So for example, at one hotel, there was a customer that really wanted to take his wife down to the beach, but his wife is in a wheelchair. So what the Ritz-Carlton employee did was hired carpenters and built a ramp going down to the beach for that customer, just so that he would be able to take his wife down to the beach, so that they can like go along the ocean and like have a nice evening on the last night of their stay. So that's one example of how a hotel can really, really go above and beyond to emphasize customer relations and emphasize how they have like a customer service mindset, for example. So others include like Tiffany & Co. if you're doing apparel and accessories. If you're doing more on the retail side, or if you're doing on the food side, you want to maybe look at Starbucks, McDonald's, a bunch of different companies that have done things that are really, really amazing, that have made them the industry giants that they are today. So definitely you want to take those examples and integrate them into your case, so that your judge knows that you know your stuff, and that you can show that what you're doing or what you want to do with the company that you're given has worked elsewhere and can work here too.
To add on to what Rishi said, since we have about a week until Provincial starts, a good thing that you want to do is to make a list of all the companies that are relevant to your category. So for example, if you're doing apparel and accessories like I am, a good idea is to list out all the companies based on their price points as well as their target audience, because you know that even within the apparel and accessories industry, not all stores target the same kind of audience. Yes, audience. So that's something you want to do. And another example is if you're doing food marketing, for example, you have grocery markets, you also have bakeries, and you also have delis. And then those are all different types of companies. So you definitely want to search up what kind of real world stores exist in your industry right now, and make a list so that you have something to talk about at Provincials. Because during your case, you can be talking about your company, relating the PI to your company specifically, but something that's really helpful is to bring the judge back to the real world by connecting it to a real life company. And this way your judge knows that you actually know what you're talking about, and it's applicable. It's not just theoretical.
Yeah, I agree exactly with what Lucy said, and also you can even bring in a personal example, a story that you've had in the marketplace. And what this does is this makes it more of a communication between the judge and you, and less of a role play. And you get to know each other more on a personal level, even though it's pretty one-sided. Does anybody else have anything to say about examples?
Yeah, so you could also include a rhetorical or like a hypothetical situation, or you can even say like, oh, picture this, you're in a hotel, for example. You can always introduce other ideas or other things like that don't even necessarily relate to your role play, but still fit in order to go above and beyond. And let's say you're talking about a hotel, you can talk about people in the hotel going to the rooftop pool, for example, even if there isn't actually a pool on the roof in the case, as long as you remain creative and have other things to say as well.
Awesome. So, Lucy, do you want to get into some of the visuals then?
Yeah, okay. So everyone says that a good idea is to use visuals. And a lot of the questions that we've received is what's the best visual to use? And my answer to that is that you need to find a visual that's actually applicable to your case. So today I'm just going to go over some of the visuals I tend to use in my cases, and then you can see if you can apply this to the case that you get at Provincials. Okay, so the first one, I actually made an economics graph. If you can see here, since it's an economics graph, it's basically applicable to whatever company you want to use, you're talking about. So I'll just explain how this works. On this x-axis, it's quantity, and then on this axis, it's price. So then this is the supply curve, and then this is the demand curve. This especially works if you have a case about pricing where they ask you to determine whether or not to provide discounts, or whether you want to move to a higher price point so that you can have a higher price margin. So profit margin, sorry. So if you want to talk about equilibrium as well as supply surplus and shortages, this is how it works. So at equilibrium, for the price that's offered, the quantity is exactly, it matches exactly, for the price that's offered at equilibrium, then the quantity supplied by suppliers is exactly how much is demanded by customers. So that's why there's no shortage or surplus. But for example, in your case, if you have a too high of a price, then you'll get a shortage because the quantity supplied by your suppliers is greater than that demanded by customers. Or if it's too low, then you'll have am I saying this right? Okay, sorry. If the price is too high, then you'll have a surplus. And then if the price is too low, then you'll have a shortage. So when you have a surplus, that's because the price that you're selling at is too high, so customers don't want to buy it or they're not able to buy it. And then when we have a shortage, that's when you're selling at prices too low. So there's increased demand for the good. And then that's something you can talk about in your case study, whether it's about price or just an economic case study in general. And another good visual to use is a SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, W stands for weaknesses, O stands for opportunities, and T stands for threats. So this is something you can use right at the beginning of your case study when you want to do like an evaluation of your company, just to give your judge a sense of where your company stands right now. So in each of these 4 quadrants, you would just list out like the main points pertaining to your company right now, and then you could just go over that in your case study. On top of that, you can also do marginal utility and total utility graphs. I'm not sure if that's completely applicable, but I'll just show that right now anyways. Okay, so here you go. And then this chart basically says that as you, for example, if I'm consuming pizza, the first slice of pizza I consume, it gives me a lot of happiness or utility. But the more I consume, the more my total utility increases. But my marginal utility, which is like each additional amount of happiness from each slice of pizza, is decreasing. And then this blue line, which represents marginal utility, once it becomes negative, then the total utility starts decreasing. So you can also use this to explain why you want customers to buy a certain product and how you can incentivize them to buy more of a product, even with the total utility and marginal utility in mind. Okay, and then, so other ideas for visuals include like if you're talking about an advertisement, it's a good idea to actually draw out the advertisement so the judge can see it. Or even if you come up with a new brand logo, it's a good idea to draw it out because this is something that a lot of competitors don't do. And when you do it, it really helps you stand out. Do any of you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually I do. So one thing that I found really powerful in addition to some of the visuals that Lucy talked about, and you can even relate it to her visuals, is the business cycle. So the business cycle basically looks, I tried to draw it out, but my art skills aren't the best, as like an up and down GDP over here versus time. And for example, in 2008, we were at a trough, a low point in our economy. And when we are at a trough, what's more likely to have, what's going to have higher demand, inferior goods or luxury goods? When we're at a low point in the economy, inferior goods, which in other words are cheaper goods, are going to have higher demand. And as soon as you can relate this bigger picture of the environment that goes on, you can have a much more successful role play, in my opinion, and you can bring in this bigger picture back to your role play.
One more thing to add is that you don't necessarily need a graph or chart for every single PI. If you can incorporate like the basic information or a basic idea into some sort of visual, or just like even the define and explain part of the DECA PI into a visual, then that can really, really help.
Yeah, to add on to Rahul's point, I think it really serves to elevate your responses to the PIs if you can also introduce some numbers and put some quantitative information on your charts, especially because you can actually make up some numbers that you think are reasonable, and the judge will find that super impressive. And if the case itself has the numbers in them, then feel free to add them to your charts, and it only makes what you're presenting look stronger.
And one more thing that I think is pretty applicable as well. A lot of people tend to use business cards, or they really like to have a presentation slide using paper PowerPoints in order to write like random contact information in order to tell your judge at the end that they can contact you. So it is a real role play.
And not only that, something that some competitors find really useful is if you present like using a PowerPoint format. So you have like a couple of sheets and you write your points out a little bit nicely and you show that to the judge almost like a flip PowerPoint. Some judges like that, and for some people it really works as a different way of presenting as opposed to just directly talking and using visuals as a supplement, using the PowerPoint format as the main medium for your presentation.
Yeah, especially because sometimes your judge is going to drift off and not really be able to follow exactly what you're saying. So if you have a paper PowerPoint with the main points, the judge will definitely be able to read it and fully understand what it is that you are saying.
But whatever piece of visual you have, it's important that and useful because the judge is probably going to keep that and reevaluate it when you're done your role play.
Yeah, Shanbing, do you want to go into tips for teams?
Yes. Okay. So tips for teams, something really important is there's a good flow between the two partners and it doesn't feel like two separate role plays. What I did with my partner is we split up like odd and even. So like I would do all the odd, do all the even PIs, and that way there's like a good like balance of both of us talking. Else we also did was filming ourselves when we were doing our role plays so that we could go back and watch, you know, how our flow was, how the chemistry was between the two of us. We also used a lot of statistics because it makes us sound legit. Also, it's really important that no one talks for a full minute straight because it can get really boring. So like, let's say you're doing the intro. You don't also want to do the first PI. You want to split the two things up so that the judge gets a good idea of how you two work. And like one of the most important things is to never talk over one another because that can seem like you guys haven't practiced or you guys aren't professional. Be very creative because team events can be very competitive. So come up with more ideas than you would if you're doing an individual one because you also have 30 minutes to prepare. When it comes to marketing and things like that, you really want to take out all your ideas and just be creative basically.
Yeah, another thing for teams that you can definitely do is to refer to your partner. So when you're talking to the judge, when they're talking, you can look at them and smile, nod, and even go like, for example, if Shambing and I were partners, I could say, like Shambing said, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And I could like Jess said, and we could like refer back to each other, and that works well.
Perfect. Are there any other tips that we have for teams? If we don't, I believe
One
Lucy
more.
has.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, go for it, Lucy.
Lucy, do you want to talk about how we can use your presentation time?
Oh, okay, perfect. So for teams, you have 30 minutes to prepare, and it seems like a lot of time, but when you're writing down ideas, the time passes by really quickly. And when I was training at ICDC for teams a couple years ago, what I noticed was that the teams that actually placed in the top 10 or won a trophy, they were the ones that, like whenever we were presented a case study, they would come up with a theme for their solution. Since I was in a marketing category, so this is especially applicable. So a lot of our cases involved creating marketing campaigns, and then every time the teams that were really good, they would come up with like a slogan or a name just for their solution, and then that really stands out to your judge as well. Yes. Okay, so now I'm actually going to go into how to use your preparation time for individual role plays, because I know it's only 10 minutes long, and that seems very short, but there's a way you can use it very effectively. So what I like to do is that when I first see the case study, I'll read it over quickly first. That's the first thing I do. I read it for about a minute, and then I stop. So then how I split up my paper when I'm making my notes is like this. Hopefully you can see it. So it's just one sheet of paper, and then I split it up into 6 categories. So then the first box is where you put your general information about your case, such as how your sales are doing right now, or what your judge is asking you to do. And then each of the following boxes are PIs are spaces for you to jot notes about PIs. And then at the very top, you never want to forget what your position is. So you got to put that down, as well as your company name and then your judge name. So then for each PI, typically I spend about like 1.5 minutes or so. You never want to go longer. You just want to make sure you get all your points down quickly. And you don't want to write in full sentences. For most of our ideas, I just write down 1 word or 2 words, because what I think about the note-taking part is that it just helps remind you of what you're going to say during a case study, but it's not for you to write down your script. So you definitely don't want to waste time on that. And what's really important is that you have at least 1 minute at the end to just go over your ideas and then how you're going to make it a cohesive presentation. So if you don't have time to run through the entire thing in your mind, it's good to just run through at least your introduction so that you can have it ready before you go to your judge. On the point about introductions, I usually come up with like a very general introduction before regionals and provincials, and then at the competition, I just like kind of alter it to meet the case study requirements. So this way you're not on the dot thinking about how you're going to introduce yourself and wasting time in your valuable 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So I think you really want to have a prepared introduction and conclusion going in, so you don't waste any time on that, as Lucy said. And also bank in about 2 or 3 minutes at the end to create all your visuals. Or if it works better for you, you can create whichever visual right after you're done taking your notes for that performance indicator. So for me personally, I like to write out all the key information for my performance indicators that I'm going to be mentioning for sure. And then if I have some time at the end, or usually I leave about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I just quickly look over the performance indicators, see which ones I can incorporate visuals into the best, and then take that time to create those visuals right before I'm going into the judge. And then while you're creating your visuals, it's also a great time to review. So if you find that you're really scrapped for time to take your notes and your general notes and your PI and create your visuals, you can kind of work on reviewing as you create your visuals.
Perfect. So should we get into, are there any questions that we should address regarding the role play events, the role play?
So we do have...
I think there is one question from Angel Gao. So her question was advice for presenting earlier versus later on in the day. I think there's not necessarily something specifically different that you should do. Just remember that the later on in the day that it is, the more cases the judge has seen. So make sure you, if you're presenting later in the day towards the evening or late afternoon, remember to be like super enthusiastic and smiling a lot, and make sure you try to engage the judge as much as you can because they've had a long day and so have you. So make sure that you get that enthusiasm across so they're just as engaged as if you were the first case that they had in the morning. And same thing if you're very early in the morning. Cases start usually at around 9, maybe even earlier. So make sure that you are engaged, you're awake, and that you're really ready to go and prepared, and you're engaging with your judge.
I think that a big thing that you can do is try to empathize with the judge and imagine that you're in their position. So they come here as volunteers and they spend the entire day listening to presentations. So if you're at the end of the day, you can even make some comments like saying, well, I know that you've had a long day, and so I'm going to try to make this a short presentation, or I'm going to try to sum up the main characteristics at the end. And this way the judge knows that you're able to empathize with them and that you understand the situation from their point of view.
To add on to that, and empathizing with the judge, you can even make a quick joke at the beginning. It doesn't have to be anything too funny. Something like, oh, wow, I love how you've set up the office today. Or something just to get them like a little bit snapped up, awake, ready to listen to you. Because especially if you're, well, at the day, you don't, if they put it in. But by doing those little things, you can really stand out. And on the topic, we had a gal ask for some emotional intelligence tips. And so I think that those are referring to generally in cases where you don't have a specific set goal other than to try to please a customer. For example, like a customer is coming in, they're really angry and you want to make things right. Or you want to make sure that someone leaves happy, or it's like really emotional cases like that, where some of the PIs can be a little bit more vague in terms of what you have to do. So I hope that that's what the point of the question is. And in terms of that, you just want to make sure that you're as nice as possible. In these sort of cases, your business knowledge and your key terms and buzzwords don't have to be as refined, just because most likely in this case you're speaking to a customer, like a fellow customer. You won't communicate to your customer the same way that you communicate to your general manager. So you just want to keep in mind who your audience is, what role your judge is playing, and then just kind of cater to what's going to be the best for that specific situation.
Right. So we got another question about if your visuals need to be organized and if so you're not allowed a ruler. Honestly, the judge doesn't expect anything professional or like professional. You have to make the visuals and prepare to explain the visual.
Also, Keshav asked a question about in your event, if you do not get asked a question. So if you don't get asked a question in your event, then that just means that you covered the topic. You covered the topic that they were asking for in your role play. So then just end off with your normal conclusion that you would have.
And Jessica,
we also got another question.
Do you want to go first?
We got another question. Yeah, sure. You can go. You can go if you'd like.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so we had, this is kind of a transition into Alexander Blank asked, how can we make up believable financial stats for FTDM? So we were going to mention this anyways, which is the fact that we have a brand new resource for all of you on the Provincial Resource Hub. So if you log into your DECA dashboard, under training, you'll see DECA Hub. And if you scroll all the way down, you can see Finance Simplified, and it says new update right next to it. So Finance Simplified is this textbook that Bei-Chen Lin and Ramis Najam, who are 2 first-place ICDC winners, created specifically for DECA Ontario. So if you're in ACT, BFS, FTDM, PFN, or PFL, you can going to benefit you. So just click on to the resources and you'll see a bunch of sample chapters that we've put up. And so essentially the entire textbook is going to be released later on probably at the pre-ICDC meeting. But so far we have 3 sample chapters. So we have a legal view, chapter 5, chapter 11, incredible investments, and chapter 9, which is all about risk and risk management. And we have this little welcome note from the authors. So we encourage anyone in those few finance categories to hop on the hub, take a look, download those PDFs, and go through all of the content there. There's some amazing stuff. Lots of case studies. It's made specifically for DECA and DECA Ontario. So they try to tie in a bunch of financial concepts to the performance indicators that you might see on your case come this Friday. So it's highly encouraged that you get on there, download those, and in terms of making up the statistics, you can find some great stuff on there as well. So they take a very kind of real life approach to all the content that they're delivering. There's also some sample questions at the end, and just in general, it's great stuff. So highly recommended that you go and check it out.
Yeah, and I know that the textbook is catered towards people competing in finance, but there are actually some chapters that are applicable to everyone's category. So I know there's one on economics, there's one on law and types of businesses. So anyone can feel free to check that out as well. And to answer Jessica Liu's earlier question, which was how do you study for your exam other than doing practice/pass exams? Well, yes, some other people commented in the live chat that there is a DECA term Quizlet online, but you can also study your PIs since all of the questions are actually based on your performance indicators.
And there was another question that was asked about how do you suggest we continue the role play if we have no idea what the PI is or if we blank out or forget what we have to say? Well, there's a couple of things that you can actually do if this happens. So if you are prepping and you look at your list of PIs and there's one PI that you have no idea what it means whatsoever, what I suggest that you do is look at the PI and break it down into the individual words. Likely they're going to be words that you mean. So for example, words that you know. So for example, if you get explain consumer buying behavior and you don't know the theory behind consumer buying behavior, so like you don't know like complex versus dissonance inducing versus variety seeking versus habitual buying behavior, just look at the words in and of themselves, right? So buying behavior generally will probably look at something about the way that a person will act when they're making buying or purchasing decisions. And then you can go along that line of thought and sort of explain that to the judge, as it's probably a pretty accurate interpretation of what the PI is actually supposed to be. So definitely look at it and break it down into the individual words and try to explain those and try to explain how it connects to your case, as that would be a good way to go in terms of interpreting the PI, even if you don't necessarily have a real idea of what maybe the real theory behind it is.
And at the end of the day, the best advice that I got personally was fake it till you make it. So you can go into a role play having no clue what a PI means, but if your tone of voice is great and you sound confident, you use some buzzwords, at the end of the day, if the judge isn't some insane business expert, they're not going to notice really if you just confidently say and give it your best shot. So don't be too discouraged if you go in and you don't know something. Often you'll find that after a few sentences of kind of faking it, you can kind of get a better idea of what the PI is really referring to and try to connect it back to your case a little bit more. So that's a really good piece of advice too, in addition to doing what Rishi said, which is breaking it up and trying to use those words to figure out what it means.
So I think we have time for one last question before we get into the written event aspect of this presentation. And this question is how to have a better conclusion for each and every PI. And the most valuable conclusion that I found for the PIs involves both connecting it back to your case study and relating why it's important and answering the so what question. So when you do an essay in English class, normally your English teacher asks you to answer at the end the so what. So what does this essay mean for our society? And I would try to always answer that so what question. So what about marketing management or marketing strategies? Those are some examples of some PIs. And also connect it back to your case. Does anybody have anything else to add?
I just have one like overarching things in terms of role plays. For role play, you have to make sure that you have your own unique style. Everybody that makes AC/DC and in the top 7 or whatever has their own unique thing that they do that can set them apart. So you need to think about what makes yours unique specifically and draw from a lot of different tips that you get and put them all into one sort of unique thing and then practice that and make sure it's perfect. I think that's all for role plays.
Perfect. So now I think Anna's going to be getting into some written event advice because we know we have a lot of questions relating to written events.
All right. So let's first go over some general tips for written events. So for most of your written competitors, you've already written a paper about your presentation. So remember to sell your project rather than reiterating the details that can already be found in your report, because your judge is going to be reading that before you are presenting to them. And also, another important thing is that remember that besides your actual presentation that you've already prepared for, judges are also scoring you based on how you answer the questions. So MDMQ asked us a question that is, what kind of questions might be asked for writtens, especially for innovation plan? Especially for innovation plan. So regardless of your event, look at the rubric that has already been provided, because your questions will most likely stem from what you're already being marked on. And for the last of the general tips, the most important thing is to remember to be flexible. Even though you might have already written a script or blocked out times for each topic that you're discussing, be prepared to change what you're saying, such as examples you're using to engage your judge, especially if they don't seem interested in what you're saying. Always be aware of your surroundings and anything that may influence your judge. And you can always use something the judge can relate to during your presentation as an example or transition. And that could mean a phrase that he or she said, or even something that they're wearing, or a purse or bag that they're carrying. So now let's move on to what you can bring into your presentation. So we're going to start off with visuals, because Mina Khan asked us a question, which is, what visuals do you recommend for personal financial literacy? So in terms of all written events, the best advice that we can give you is that good visuals are ones that are realistic and pertinent to your content, and they enhance but don't distract from the judge's understanding of what you're doing. Mock-ups especially are a great way to show the judge how you're going to implement something, as opposed to just writing it in your plan without visual justification. Because another important thing to remember is that your judge might not have the time to read your report fully. So now let's move on to some specifics. For your oral presentation. So you cannot use more than 3 standard size posters, and they can't exceed 2 inches, Okay. So participants may use both sides of the posters, but all attachments must fit within the poster dimension. And on top of that, you can use cell phones, smartphones, iPods, MP3 players, tablets, or any kind of handheld device, information sharing device, as long as it's applicable to the presentation. And furthermore, you are allowed to use sound as long as the volume is kept at a conversational level and doesn't disrupt other presentations that are going on at the same time. So if you missed anything that I just said, all of these can be found on the 2017 DECA guide, and DECA Ontario uses the exact same guides that are present in that guide.
So I guess some examples of some visuals that written events have done in the past are this. So one event which won at Provincials 2 years ago, I believe, was Runays, and they created a quick little pamphlet like so, and inside they had some information, and it's colored as you can see, and on the back there's a little business card, and they handed this to the judge. And there's some other examples of little things that businesses make, partners in the team events make, which they give to the judge. And essentially what this does is this shows the judge that you went that extra step, and it's what the judge remembers you for. It's important for the judge to have something to take away, apart from that 30 or 10-page document that you created. Are there any other tips that we have for written events?
Just that if you're using any kind of technology, make sure that everything works offline. So for example, if you're using Prezi, make sure to save it in an offline mode, because there isn't Wi-Fi for you to use in the competition rooms.
Perfect. So now I think that we can answer some questions regarding written events if we have any. MDMQ asks, can I use laminated posters from Staples? And the answer to that is yes. You can use any form of paper that you want, as long as it meets the requirements that have been posted on the DECA Ontario or DECA Inc. website. So I believe that's all for written events. We can answer some questions at the end if anybody has anything else. And right now we're going to be getting into some exam training, especially since we're running out of time. So Rahul and Ben, would you like to talk about how you can boost your score for the exam?
Yeah, sure. So I think that we're going to start off just talking a little bit briefly about why the exam is so important. It's the only non-objective. It's the only part that where you can really completely control your outcome of it, and it only comes from putting in the work for it. And it can really set yourself apart, because if you put in the work for it and other people don't, then that's a really, really good way to make it into that top 7 and qualify for ICDC. So obviously when you're studying for exams, the best way is to just take practice tests. There's so many from the past, and they often repeat questions and everything like that. But if you want to go a little bit more in depth beyond that, then I would say that firstly it's about finding the specific elements that you're messing up on. So let's say that you're messing up on a lot of questions between questions 40 to 50. Then if you look, then you'll see, okay, all of them are customer relations. So then you need to practice more of customer relations, but maybe if you're getting everything right for promotion, then you know everything about promotion. So if you look at those specific things or those specific concepts, then it can really help your score. And also it's really important to compile every single answer that you get wrong. So every single answer that you get wrong has 4 different concepts. So if you write all those concepts in a book and you add to the book, I have my book right over here, and it's just kind of just a bunch of pages of different concepts, and then you can review that, and you can continue reviewing that up till the day, rather than just keep on taking practice tests. Anything that Ben also has some more stuff.
Yeah, so that book can actually be an online Google Doc too, where you just kind of compile every single thing that you've gotten wrong before. And what you'll also notice is that by repeating tests, you're going to get yourself a lot ahead, just because the questions repeat so many times. So you'll be able to kind of save on a few points that you would have otherwise gotten wrong just by doing exams over and over again. So often you'll notice that the same questions are there. And so just do as many as you can. That's what we encourage, and try to memorize those answers. And on top of what Rahul said as well, you want to be looking at the actual point divisions of the exams. So how many points there are for each section. So as Rahul mentioned, there was customer relations there, but there can also be a lot of other categories as well. So you can get a certain amount of points in promotion, or a certain amount of points in something else. So we have that breakdown for you in our training manual. So if you get onto the hub and download our training manual, we have the exam division. So exactly how many points are there for each certain category. So you have for every single exam, there's a business core, so like a business admin core, which is present in every single exam, and that's 60 points or 60 points. And then after that, you have points that are specific to your cluster. So you want to be looking at what is the section with the largest amount of points for your specific exam, and obviously focusing on that because that's the quickest way to get the most points as possible. So we're just going to try to pull up the exam division in the training manual, and also try to post the link for the breakdown for provincials and for ICDC. So let's just give us a second here.
Yeah. While Ben's doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry. While Ben's doing that, what I can talk about is another thing that I just kind of realized is that it's important to have benchmarks when you're doing this. So what you can do is that you can go through all the tests in your cluster and write down every single test number. And then what you can do is you can write tests like practice test 1 and practice test 2 for each test number. So then if you take it the first time, you take all of them once, and then you go through it again, then you can really notice, okay, I'm getting a lot better in certain tests, I'm not getting a lot better in another test. And then you can really sort of zone in and slowly start to really figure out exactly which specific ones that you need to build on. And
exactly. So let's just see here. I'm trying to pull it up. It should be in the official DECA guide. The breakdown for provincials and ICDC, and I'll try to post that link in the live chat on the YouTube link. So we'll just get that up in a second. If anyone has anything else to add in terms of exam tips,
I actually have one more thing.
Yeah, Rahul, you go.
Sorry, Venya. Just one more thing is building on what Ben said regarding the training manual. If you go through that and you go through all the test tips in there, you'll also find some concepts that are really, really important to know for the test. So make sure you know all those concepts down. And then the stuff that you study in your test is just really easy to apply to your role play. So there's an added benefit of putting a lot of emphasis on the test.
So Minha Khan asks, how 1 second, let me just find the question. Tips for time management during exams. Well, Lucy answered it saying try to do the exam in 45 minutes, then you have 30 minutes to look it over. So find like a smaller time constraint and do it under that time. Also understand how many minutes or how much time you have to answer each question. So let's say you're going to do 10 questions, and set a timer for what your time goal is for those 10 questions, and then do the exam that way. Also, what you can do is when you're actually writing the exam, I know what a lot of people do is they start off at the beginning of the exam, and then as soon as a question stumps them, they go to the very end of the exam and work their way backwards. And as soon as the question stumps them, they make their way back up. And then after this way, you get a new taste of different questions during the exam, and it can help with time management. A lot of people have found it.
Exactly. And that's just one strategy too. You can do whatever works for you. So if you're someone who takes a little bit longer to think about every single question, don't be afraid to take that maximum amount of time for every single question. So you can either kind of go through the exam quickly and then go back and double check with the extra time, or take your time for every single question. Just make sure that you're not going over time, obviously, but it's just two different ways of trying to do that. So we did find the link for the standard, so DECA test specifications for 2016-2017, and I'm going to post that in the YouTube live chat right now.
Okay, to add on to exam tips, make sure you skip hard questions, because otherwise you're going to waste so much time on a single question. And I know for me, like my usual score at regionals is 86, and this year's marketing exam was really hard. But because I skipped the hard questions, I didn't let that impact the other questions that were coming up. So that actually helped me improve my score this year. And that's something that I think all of you should take into consideration. So definitely don't stay on a question if you don't know how to answer it. Just move on and then come back once you're done everything else. On top of that, when you're doing practice exams right now, you can also make a spreadsheet with all the questions that you got wrong and then put the correct answer next to that question. So then when you're studying for provincials, if you don't have time to redo everything, you can just look at the answers instead of doing all the exams. And then this way you get information and you also don't mess up on the same questions.
Also, for just some reason in the live chat, it's not allowing us to post links. So I'll just post that link in the description or in the comments on our Facebook post for this Hangout.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, Shaming.
No,
go for
go.
Shaming. I was just going to say one more.
Rahul, you
Sure. Okay. So I was just gonna say one more thing for exams. Just make sure that you do the entire exam every single time you're practicing. You can't do 20 or 50 questions and then stop, because a big part of the exam is the ability to endure 100 questions. It is quite taxing on your mind. So just doing the entire exam and every single time will really help in terms of endurance.
I agree with Rahul on that statement. However, it's also important to practice consistency. So one thing that I did last year before provincials is I promised myself that every morning I do 10 questions. And when I was like practicing on a Saturday or something, I try to do a full exam. But if you can try to build that consistent and build it into a habit, you'll be able to understand what type of questions you'll see. And looking at the questions consistently, when the exam actually comes around at provincials, you'll be able to know how to approach most questions. So what you could try to do is build it into a routine. So every morning you wake up and first thing you do is answer 5 questions. Look at the answers either then or after school, and then after try to understand what you got wrong and learn from that.
Okay, so the thing with exams is that they're hard. So even if you're not doing well on the first couple, that makes sense. They're they're supposed to mess you up. And honestly, the only way to improve on exams is just keep going. Help though is to read some like business, such as like the Harvard Business Review or like Business Insider, and just keep yourself updated with what's going on in the real world. So that way you can.
Shangbing?
I think Shangbing might have froze there. Basically what she was saying is try to find any additional resources that you have and learn from those. First of all, those will help out with your exam score, but also help out with the role play in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
also okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so one more thing is to always read all the answers if you can, because all the descriptions will definitely help you with other exam questions, or maybe even in your role play if there's something about, like, for example, someone giving an example.
Yeah, often you'll find that there's like 4 key terms in a question, and the answer is one of those key terms. Then in the answer, they'll define the other 3. And then you could notice that in another question, there would be that other one that was just defined in the answer for you, because DECA likes to reuse the same concepts.
I think the final thing is that I'm going to stress one more time is Bei Chen Lin is writing an entire textbook for DECA Ontario, and in that textbook he goes over every single aspect of the exam. And as Jessica mentioned earlier, it's not only for finance. There he talks about some aspects of marketing. He talks about risk, which is a finance concept, but in this textbook he goes over every single thing that you should know going into the exam. So if you're looking for a resource which is directed strictly for DECA, I definitely recommend looking at that textbook.
Mm-hmm. And he even has tips for how to do role plays as well and exams, so you can find anything you really want in there, not only just for finance competitors.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any other questions right now relating to the exam? Lucy, did you say that you want to answer Minha's question?
Yes. Okay. So Minha asked if it's necessary to go over all the PIs in an instructional area, and the answer is no. And this is because when I was actually studying for provincials last year, I looked at all the instructional areas. And then when I saw the cases in each of those instructional areas, a lot of the PIs actually ended up repeating in the cases. So a really good way to practice is to look at all the instructional areas. Like when you're looking at a case, look at the top corner where it says what instructional area the case belongs in, and then see which PIs repeat often, because those are the ones that will most likely come up during your case. So you don't really have to worry about very obscure ones if you don't have time to study for them. Just make sure you know the very common ones.
Also, studying that way is quite inefficient, especially if you only have a limited amount of time to study. You don't want to be at a point where you come into a role play, you see a PI that you studied before, and then you start thinking, oh, what did I say for this when I practiced? Or what script did I write for myself when I practiced and I thought that I would get this one? You want to sound very natural with the judge. So if you sound scripted, like the way that you did when you practiced, or if you wrote yourself something out, make sure that it sounds natural if you are going that way. But I would highly recommend not to go that way and just work more on your communication skills and the ability to work in the business concepts and the buzzwords in your situation.
Perfect. So are there any other questions that we would like to address?
There was one from Jason Wang. Best way to practice for exams. It'd be to put yourself in the situation of you, like, put yourself in a quiet room, put your phone on for 75 minutes with the timer, and do it as if you were doing the real thing. And that would really help you simulate the actual experience so that you're not stressed, getting really nervous for the actual exam.
Yeah, someone asked where can I find these practice exams, and the answer is the exact same place you can find the textbook and our training manual, which is on the hub. We have tests for every single category up there from all the years back. So you can kind of go most recent to least recent. All the answer keys are up there too. So we highly encourage you to check that out, because the Answer Right portal is not going to be open other than for tomorrow and for Tuesday when schools are writing.
So Jason Wong also asked the question about what exam and role play score normally do you need to win an award? And in my experience, at least from last year, it also depends on the event, but as long as you get an 84 plus on the exam in the marketing event, then you're likely to win an award, a role play award, and for the, an exam award, and for the role play, I believe a 90 plus wins you an award. However, when you move on to the ICDC stage, you need a 90 plus on the exam normally to win an award, and a 95 plus on the role play. However, at ICDC, it does work a little bit differently when it comes to who moves on to the next finalist round.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely depends.
These are like benchmarks overall. There's no like set marks. If you get some sort of mark and you don't get something, it doesn't mean that you're gonna win. It just try to aim for like a 270 score. That's what I heard, at least last year when I was studying. And just try to be the best that you can possibly be. Keep on studying, keep on practicing, and just if you work harder than like the next person, then it'll pay off.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely depends, because I know of people who get scores in the 70s on their exams and they still make ICDC. And I know people who even have 70s on their exams at ICDC and they win. So it definitely is just a guideline, really.
It's very dependent on who's in your category, how the judges are marking you. And yeah, for most categories, it would be probably low 80s for exams minimum and low 90s for role play minimum to win something. So I think we are just about to wrap up. We might take a few final questions and then...
There was another question from Anson about if there's a difference in weighing between written and oral scores for the final scores and how the top 7 scores are determined. So just going through it really quickly, for individual orals, you get a score out of 300. So you have a score out of 100, that's your MC exam, and then a score out of 100 times 2, so 1 for each of your oral cases. For teams, you have a score that is a weighted average of both team members' MC score for the MC part, and then you also have your oral presentation mark, so that'll come up to a score of 200, I believe.
Yeah.
And then for the written competitors who do have an exam, so you will get a score out of 200, 100 of which comes from your MC exam, and the other 100 is further divided into your presentation and your actual written entry. And then finally, you have written events that do not have an exam, so you will get a score out of 100 that is further subdivided into your written entry as well as your presentation.
Don't forget that all tiebreakers for oral events are done through the exam. So whoever has the higher exam score, if the scores are tied, is the person that places higher. So you want to be focusing on that too, even though it's usually only a third of your score for the individual events.
So Pranoy Lal, I'm sorry if I mess up your name, asks, if you're on an executive team and find that one of your chapter members is really nervous before the role play, what can you do to help them de-stress them? This is a really good question, and I find especially within the younger grades and even the older grades too, people can get really nervous and stressed before a role play. I find that some of the best things that you can do is help them, breathe with them, take them to a corner away from where everybody is and just have a conversation with them. Get their mind off the role play, maybe even take them outside to get some fresh air. If you help get their mind a little bit off the role play, maybe talk to them, have a conversation, it can help them relax a little bit before the role play and have a much better competition. Another thing that I know some people do, this past weekend I had some interviews, and at those interviews, some people were even meditating before their interviews. And what it does is it helps you almost like leave that emotional aspect. And I'm not sure if you can teach them any form of meditation, but that does also help with de-stressing.
Another thing that I wanted to add about de-stressing is that remind anybody who's really nervous or really anxious that you're going into this trying to have fun, right? Like DECA and like the role plays and all that is supposed to be something where you enjoy yourself and you go and just try your best. It's not necessarily always about focusing on getting that really high score so that you can get up on stage. It's also a lot about enjoying the process and enjoying what you're doing here at DECA, because that's one of our main goals, is to provide an excellent experience for guys and for you guys to have fun. So remind your members of that too, that no matter what happens at the end of the day, what matters most is that they had a good time and that they tried their best. And ultimately, that's what matters, and that's what they're going to remember, not necessarily that one role play.
Also, we have Parth Serene asking, is it okay to write things in front of the judge or judges during your presentation? So I think the main thing with that is that you just want to have a very natural interaction with your judge and not make it awkward. So I've personally had times where I had a graph in front of my judge, and then I took out a pencil or a pen and I kind of circled things or guided them through the cycle that I was showing them on my graph. But the thing is, if you're spending a very excessive amount of time creating this graph right in front of the judge and it's eating up into your role play time, then maybe that's not appropriate to do. So it's kind of up to your own personal discretion what you want to do. If you feel the need to write something right in front of them, just make sure it isn't notes or anything that could make it awkward or pause you while you're presenting.
So has anyone gone over Madhu and N's question, which is there any concept you would recommend to mention for finance role plays?
I don't think so.
If not, we can answer that right now. And this is applicable to most events and most role plays, is you need to develop a toolbox. So when Rahul and I did chapter visits this October, we really stressed the toolbox. So imagine a toolbox. Inside you have all different types of tools, and let's say your toilet breaks at home. Are you going to use every single tool in that toolbox? No. You pick and choose the right tools for that job. It's the same with a role play. If you're given a role play, let's say in finance, which tells you to talk about a certain problem, you choose the right tools from your toolbox to approach that problem. And so, as for the question, are there any concepts that you would recommend for us to mention in finance role plays? I think some typical ones that you could talk about would be auditing or relating it back to the economic situation. Do we have any of the executives who have done finance events before?
Like I didn't do finance, but I know that I remember from the role plays that I've looked at, like make sure you know all the different ratios, like the basic ones that are really, really important when analyzing company, and also like learn stuff like FIFO and LIFO, and just we have a full page on it on our training manual, so definitely go on there, and that's applicable for every single category. There's one page of different content pieces that you should know for the test and for the role play.
Mm-hmm. Also, we have Anson asking, I've heard that some judges don't respond to questions. So if you ask, do you understand everything I said? The judge will stay dead silent. And the reason that is just because the judges in their judge training are taught not to show kind of any signs of, oh, you did well or oh, you did poorly. They're just being told to stay as kind of like monotone and not give away how you've done. So you could have done absolutely excellent, and they would have given you the exact same response as someone who hasn't done so well has. So really don't base your opinion kind of on that. You don't necessarily need to ask them how you've done or if they've understood everything, and just find a natural way to conclude things and accept the fact that the judge won't necessarily show you exactly how they're feeling, and you'll only really know once you get it back.
So unfortunately, we're running out of time right now. So we're going to do a wrap up. But afterwards, I think some of the executives are going to stick around and we can answer any questions that you have afterwards. So Rishi, would you like to go over the wrap up for the people who weren't here at the beginning but are here now?
Yeah, for sure. So we just have a really quick checklist of everything that you guys should remember going into provincial. So make sure you have all of these things. So full business attire, and that should be worn at all times to avoid any deductions. So for writtens, you want to get all of your materials, copies of everything backed up on USBs. Nothing should require Wi-Fi, as that likely won't be available, and all that stuff, so that when you go into your presentation, you're absolutely prepared. Don't forget your DECA name badge and your photo ID, as you need both of those things to compete. Don't forget your DECA pad folio, as that's useful if you want to use that for your role play as your paper. Blank paper if you need that. A 4-function calculator for your MC. Black pens or pencils, because only black or blue ink is allowed. And you definitely want a pencil for your Scantron if you're going to be writing an MC at provincials. Obviously, some things like lunch money to get all of your essentials when you're not competing. If you want to bring study materials along with you, because your MC isn't until Saturday morning and you want to be practicing your MCs while you're at provincials, don't forget to bring those along. And always remember to make sure you know whether or not you're going to go to ICDC if you do end up making it, so that when we ask for your verbal confirmation, you'll be able to give that to us. Make sure you know whether or not you're going to go to ICDC.
Okay, perfect. So I believe that's a wrap for this Hangout. Thank you so much for everybody who listened in. We wish you all the best at Provincials this year. If any of you see us throughout Provincials, make sure to come up, say hi. We would love to talk, even if we are running around and a little bit busy. And if you have any questions from now up to Provincials, be sure to message us on Facebook, send us an email, message us on Twitter, and we'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So now I think that it is officially wrapped up, but I'm going to stay around with hopefully some of the other executives to answer any other questions that you might have.
Oh, and definitely make sure to come to the award ceremony, because that would be fun.
Yeah, we can't wait to see you, and good luck studying for this next week.
Awesome. So Sakshi Shah asks, is there such thing as too many visuals? And I think the answer to that is yes. I would try to limit it to 1 or 2 visuals for each presentation. Maybe, let's say you do supply and demand and relate it to the business cycle as well. Because if you have too many visuals, it detracts from your actual presentation itself.
I'd say at the same time, visual is a good way to sort of add an extra element of communication when you're speaking to the judge. So, if you can like put your information into like some sort of like flow chart or something like that, then, and you can keep it on between the 7 and 8 minute recommended time for role play, then I'd say that just don't try to put everything in one role play. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree that it detracts if you have too many. Try to spend your time crafting or drawing out 1 or 2 really good ones, and then that's what's going to set you apart, and not necessarily showing them 10 visuals that you took 10 seconds each to make.
So Minha Khan, actually Rishi just answered that question, but I'm going to go over this answer for everybody else who's still in the call. Minha Khan asks, what would you recommend to study for personal finance? There are so many terms to go over. Rishi says, I'd advise to go over the PI document for personal finance, as there are a lot of information given in that document. And I guess some extra stuff that you can do on top of that would be going to Quizlet or some other online medium in which they can quiz you, and just keep on doing questions, practice, in which case slowly you'll develop a taste for these terms, and then after you'll be able to answer the questions when you see them throughout the personal financial literacy exam.
Yeah.
how many minutes? Cynthia Zhang asks, how many minutes should be left for questions for writtens? Does anyone want to answer that?
So I think Lucy said that the series director will signal 1 minute, but I think you want to leave a little bit more time than 1 minute. 1 minute is a great indicator to know when you have to start really wrapping up. But I'd say about 2 to 3 minutes is fair. Most people leave it at 2 minutes, and that's kind of enough time to answer and think about your 2 or 3 questions. You want to make sure that you're not in a position where you have to spit out an answer as soon as the judge asks the question, because again, it looks much more professional if you take a few seconds to think about what you're going to say and then say it, and it's not rushed either. Remember that there's a specific section of your rubric that specifically has the judge evaluating you on how well you can answer the questions. So you want to make sure you're not running out of time, you're leaving those 2 or 3 minutes, and that you're thinking about each question very carefully before you start answering.
So I think, yeah, exactly what Ben said. And now Shreya Dady asks the question, I think this is for the second time, I saw it before. How do you transition between PIs without seeming awkward? And I think that the best transition that I found between PIs is bringing in the next performance indicator into the performance indicator that you're talking about. So I'll actually pull up a role play right now and try to do an example. And if anybody else has anything else to talk about while I do that.
So let's see here.
I just want,
Any more questions?
I think that to do that, what Venya's saying, to incorporate it and sort of link all the PIs together, it just takes a lot of practice. So make sure that you know how to do it and don't try to do it first time with the judge, because that would be pretty tough to do.
So like an example for an MCS event is explain the concept of marketing strategies as the second performance indicator, and then the third performance indicator, explain the nature of the marketing plan. So you can start off by introducing marketing strategies, go over that DECA PI model that we talked about earlier, and then afterwards say, well, marketing strategies is a part of the marketing plan. And now what I'm going to be talking about is the nature of a marketing plan and how we can utilize a marketing plan to have a successful business and successfully complete this market analysis that we're currently doing. And as you can see there, I took those 2 PIs and I almost like tied them together as if they're one. And I found that this is a really valuable way to make your presentation very like conducive to understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And also, some judges like it if you roadmap and say every single indicator, but some judges don't. So you have to kind of find the balance in between. And I really agree with Vanya. I think that comes with cohesively transitioning from one indicator to the next.
Yeah. And you should definitely try to stick in order, because on the rubric, they make sure they follow the order. So if you go onto another PI, they may not be sure if you actually are talking about that PI or if you're talking about another one, because generally most people tend to stay in order. So you should as well.
So Anson, he asks the question earlier, I believe Rishi stated that you should prepare all your materials for exam preparation. Does this mean that we have to give a presentation for writtens too? And the answer to that, I believe, for all of written events is you submit that 30 or 10-page document, but in addition to that, you present your presentation to the judge. And the presentation makes up 50% of your mark, and so yes, you do have to create a presentation for writtens.
To answer James's question about whether it's all right or not to switch around the order of performance indicators, if you make it clear that you are switching the order, then it's definitely fine.
Are there any other questions that we've missed so far?
I think Minha is asking, is it likely that the instructional area for regionals will be repeated in provincials? And I would say that it's quite unlikely, because it could happen, but DECA Inc. is in charge of, typically in most categories, DECA Inc. is going to be making all the cases. So they're only making a limited amount of cases per year. Most likely it will be switched around. So you want to make sure you're studying everything that you can regardless. Don't be quick to rule something out if you saw it at regionals, because it might pop up again.
Parth
Yeah.
Serene asked the question, would it be a good idea to have a wrap up at the end of saying all the PIs you covered? And I personally have a wrap up at the end of every presentation. What this does is it, once again, reinforces the idea to the judge that I did talk about all 5 or 6 or 7 performance indicators and that I didn't miss any. And it also, once again, helps sum up your idea and what you want the judge to take away from your presentation. So I definitely recommend it, but I do know there's some people who like to conclude a different way.
You don't want to be too repetitive in using the exact same wording as what it says on the sheet twice. So you can use that exact same wording at the beginning before you say each PI to make sure that the judge knows that you know what you're talking about. But then in terms of Jason Wang is asking, how do you list all the PIs without seeming awkward? The trick is changing around the wording so that you're still talking about the same thing and the judge still knows that, but that it doesn't sound too like you're saying the same thing over and over again. So you can kind of tie it to an example and then say, like, because of that example, that's why I think that this and this is so important, or something along those lines. You can, by tying it into the case, it makes it a little bit less repetitive.
There's like one more thing I'd like to add to that. In terms of like the conclusion, I think it's also important to go beyond just the PIs and also state like, say you have 2 or 3 like really key ideas that you want to emphasize. Also say those at the end of the PIs. But at the end of the overall presentation, I think that's what Jennifer was asking. How do you conclude the entire presentation? What I'd say is that it's really cool to sort of prepare something in advance slightly. So be like, thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, you can email me, or you know my number, something like that. Or I'm excited to meet you again next Monday to further discuss this. Anything like that at the end before you leave will just leave a really good impression with the judge, because it's something that you can prepare ahead of time.
For sure. And once again, what this does is this makes it more personal, and it doesn't make it seem like you're a robot just regurgitating your answers. You want to be a character. You want to go in there as if you're, it's almost like a play. I believe Sid wrote this in his Tip Tuesday. You want to go and put the idea into the judge's head that you're the best candidate. And how do you do this? You have a communication with the judge. And this, I guess, ties into Liam's question, which is, what if the judge appears to be disinterested in what you're talking about or bored? Well, Ben answered this question saying that the judges are sometimes told to look bored or to look angry, and see how you respond to that. But on top of that, if the judge actually does genuinely seem to be disinterested, try to change up what you're doing a little bit, adapt to the new circumstance the judge presents you with. So for example, if I notice that it's the end of the day, I actually did this on my Hamilton regionals. I noticed that it was the end of the day and the judge did seem to be a little bit tired and disinterested. And I noticed that I tried to bring in the idea that she had a cup of coffee on her table and how she's using that cup of coffee to power her through the day. I try to bring aspects of what she's doing in her, like right now, into the role play to appeal more on the personal level. And I find that that's a very powerful tool that you can use.
Yeah, and also generally most role plays you have to have a plan. And the most important thing for you to do at the end of your role play is to go over that plan. So maybe you have 3 steps, maybe 5, but definitely go over whether it's like yes or no. So for example, if you're doing QSRM and the problem is whether you should keep or remove an option on the menu, then make sure you, at the end of your role play, say that yes, we are removing it, or no, we aren't, and give the reasons why really succinctly.
When we were talking to some of the judges at the regional competitions, they were telling us that often students would go in knowing a lot about the indicators, presenting great information, but then at the end of the day, not summing up the case and giving like a final solution or a final conclusion, like what Jess said. So you want to make sure that you continue doing that because, again, a lot of students forget to do that.
On top of that, it's really important to ask the judge, to thank the judge for their time and ask them if they have any questions at the end. Because even if you don't get questions during your case, that means your judge might still have questions for you. So make sure you ask them explicitly if they have any questions. And it's good to allocate around 2 minutes out of your 10-minute presentation time for individuals to ask those questions.
Perfect. So I don't think that there are any other questions here. And so if everybody's okay, we're Actually,
Oh,
Larry
like
Cooks just asked a
introduction?
question. Can you give us a sample introduction? Do any of you guys have an introduction that you're
Me.
overly proud of? Okay, Lucy.
This is very
Okay, this is on the spot, but anyways, let's pretend the company is Fast Fashions and they're trying to determine a new pricing option for their products. So this is a case I did last year. Okay, so hi, my name is Lucy Chen and I am your marketing director for Fast Fashions. So before we begin, I want to thank you for your time and for wait, no, I'm starting over. Okay, hi, my name is Lucy Chen, and I'm your marketing director here at Fast Fashions. So today you've brought me here to discuss how we can price our new products so that it appeals to both our current target market as well as the new market that we're trying to reach. And before we begin, I just want to thank you for your time. I know you have a very busy schedule, and I'm very excited to share my ideas with you. So today we're going to talk about this, this, and this. And then this is usually where I give like a very, very short roadmap of my case. And then I'll just jump into the first performance indicator.
Yeah, notice how Lucy stated what her actual position was. Make sure you do that as well so the judge actually knows the role that you are playing.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
And I think asked for a sample conclusion. So as an example, if you had like a marketing case, for example, where you had to present a promotional plan, you could end off your case by saying, so just to conclude and go over everything we've talked today, I presented my marketing plan to you, which included aspects 1, 2, and 3. And we talked about the impact that this is going to have on our business and how we're going to be able to use this promotional plan moving forward and increase our sales and increase our consumer base and create loyalty within our existing clientele. So if you have any questions at this time, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And then ask you questions. And then after they're done asking you questions, just as a final send off, you could just say, before I leave, I'd just like to thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you again, or I look forward to hearing from you, depending on what the situation in your role play is.
Yeah, and I have another tip. So oftentimes if you sit down right away and go straight into your case, your judge might be a bit shocked, like, oh, that was like so quick. So you kind of want to ease into it a bit more. Maybe like Ben said earlier, note how nice their office is, or just something like that, where you don't start right away and kind of just like, make the judge comfortable that you are there.
Mm-hmm. Angel Lee is asking, where in your intro should you ask to be seated? So that can be right after the handshake or whenever you feel is comfortable for the judge. Like, just try to make it natural. Whenever you think is best for you to take a seat, don't present any information standing up, like actual concrete business information. Do the sitting down as part of all the formalities, like the handshake, oh, so nice to meet you, that stuff. And then as soon as you sit down, that's when you can get into the part of giving your outline and really starting to present your case.
Yeah, so I'll give an example. So I would walk in and say, good morning, my name is Jessica Fung, and I am the director of marketing for, I don't know, like some random company. And then I'd say, how are you doing today? And I'd be like, fine, thank you. How about you? I'm like, good, thanks. May I please take a seat? And I'd sit down.
So we have 2 questions right now. One of them is from Steph X, who asked before, what's the best time to give your scoring sheet to the judge? And would you give the scoring sheet before your introduction? You could even give it during your introduction. Play it off as if there's some documents they have to submit to the judge. Immerse yourself in the entire, role play. So say, here are the documents that I promised you at the beginning, and play the part of for example, if you're put in charge of the marketing manager. And so, yeah, I'd give it before you start your intro, talking about your performance indicators and your introduction.
Yeah, also to add on to that, you can be like, oh, here's that report here's that report you wanted, or something like the notes, just like what Vanya said.
Yeah, sure. So definitely be creative. So I know someone who even says that it's a document their secretary wanted to give the person. Like, honestly, you can just say anything as long as you integrate it into your presentation.
Mm-hmm. Doing those little things to stand out and be different is what gets people on stage. So the immersion into your case, like we all said, is really key if you want to win, on top of your business knowledge and how you communicate.
For sure. Ali Mokshin asks, for writtens, there's a written and presentation rubric. Should you include information from your report that is not stated on the presentation rubric during your presentation? I definitely think so, because that extra stuff that you include in your presentation is what goes to set you apart. Is it necessary to include in your presentation? By no means. But does it help you out? Yes. As long as it's not too much and as long as it's not disparate ideas, as long as you're able to tie everything together, it can help successfully answer the question of your presentation.
So a new question that came in about what if your case study doesn't allow you to introduce yourself as someone the judge has never met because you're an employee or someone the judge knows? So for example, one way that you can introduce yourself is, as you know, I am the marketing director at your company, insert company name here, because you still want to make sure that you're introducing yourself, introducing your name, introducing your position, and introducing the company. But that's one way for you to get all that information across without making it seem awkward or something like that. Or for example, another introduction that I really like using is, if I'm the marketing director, I'll introduce myself and I would be like, I'm the marketing director, the team lead for the new project, and we came up with something that I'm really excited to share with you. So doing these different kinds of introductions to fit the scenario definitely plays into the role that you're trying to fulfill. And these little extra things will spice up your case and make sure that you stand out to the judge.
You can also say, oh, wow, it's so great to see you again. Just make sure you say your name.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
important.
Yeah.
But you don't, if it's a role that they clearly know, then you can just say, wow, it's so nice to see you again. Because I've had judges say, like really particular judges, right on the back of my Scantron, you don't need to give me a business card or reintroduce yourself if I'm already supposed to know you. So some judges are really particular like that. You really never know. You're taking a risk, I guess. But kind of a way that you can fall back on is saying that. Just that it's nice to see them again, but make sure you state your name.
So somebody asks, any tips for smooth transitions between you and your partner in team events? So I know that Shangbing, Jess, and I have done team events before, especially at ICDC. And some of the things that I found powerful is like divide it up into performance indicators. So one person talks about one performance indicator and the next person talks about the next performance indicator. And at the end of one of the performance indicators, you introduce the next person's part and then after cue them in to come to speak. That way it's a very natural flow between the performance indicators. And if you see that one of your partners is having trouble to come up with an idea, you can tap them on the knee and come in yourself, as long as it doesn't sound like you're overpowering them.
Yeah, and in written events, I know that there aren't performance indicators. So one thing that my partner and I did when I was in grade 10 is that we would kind of build off of each other. So I'd be like Shirley said this, and she'd be like Jess said, blah, blah, blah. So that works as well.
In terms of when it would be wise to include a business card at the end of a role play, just a very quick answer is you can do it most of the time, but particularly make sure you do it when it's a brand new situation. Like if it's an emotional intelligence case and you're trying to make sure that a customer is happy, here's my business card. Please contact me again if you have any other complaints or concerns, stuff like that. And then otherwise it's up to your discretion. You don't necessarily want to give a business card if it's your manager or someone you've worked beside for like a year or something like that. So just use your discretion when it comes to that.
So we have two questions, which are both important. So how would you state your name during that time? During what time? So I guess I say my name at the beginning of the role play, saying like, hi, my name is Vanya Veslovsky. This is my partner. And then after my partner, Tony Wong introduces himself, or whoever it is. The next question comes from Harvey Specter asking, how does one beat Bayview Secondary School at DECA? And I think that there's none other than Rishi Bansal who can answer this question.
My honest response would be try your best, and if you do try your best, then anything can happen.
So Rishi, I understand that you also have some ties to UTS DECA, and would you give us some insight into how we can beat UTS DECA? This is for some of the smaller chapters around Ontario.
Honestly, I think the answer that I gave before applies to any chapter really. Is just you want to go in, know your stuff, be prepared, and try your best, and put out everything that you have on the table and show the judge everything that you have, because if you do that, you're likely going to do pretty well, and then you have a chance at getting on stage.
Don't be intimidated. Have confidence in your chapter. and the
Yeah.
methods that you use to study, and just do your best.
Oh, really quickly, to answer Part's question about if your judge already knows you, how you would say your name, this reminded me of something that we forgot to mention earlier. If you know who your judge is when you walk into provincials, into your judge booth, so if they're like a teacher at your school or if they're a parent that you know, you want to alert your series director immediately, because if you do know your judge, you could be disqualified for that. So make sure that you alert your series director and do not present to that judge.
And also to answer Maddie's question, which was when would it be wise to include a business card at the end of a role play? So definitely after your conclusion. So you want to make sure you conclude and restate everything that you said during your role play, and tell the judge that they have additional, oh, and after questions, if you can tell them, if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me and give them your business card.
For sure. And I guess one thing that indirectly answers some of the questions, like Lulu Limes, is I think that the most valuable thing that you can do is when you go into your presentation, and once you have done your role play, you understand the core idea that you want to, your central interpretation or your core idea that you want to convey to the judge. And as soon as you have this core idea and you have a core understanding of some basic topics relating to your idea, for example, the 4 P's of marketing, you can relate different creative ideas that you might have. So I believe Rahul answered this question a little bit, is try to introduce some sort of new ideas or visuals for each PI. That's very valuable. But make sure that those new visuals or new ideas relate back to that core theme or that core idea that you want to convey to that judge.
Mm-hmm. Someone else asked a question about PQ versus CS and SP, Nicole. And are there any that I should specifically study for provincials? So if you look at the huge documents of PIs, you can see that prerequisite level performance indicators, CS is career sustaining performance indicators, and then SP is the specialist level performance indicators. I think it's a lot of people think that it's the PQ ones are at regionals, and then CS at provincials, and then SP at internationals. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. You can see a mix of them, but the more specific ones are more likely to be at internationals. That's what I've heard. So it's just a division that they do of the performance indicators, but not necessarily reflective of what you'll see at provincials. If anyone wants to add on to that.
So we have some Markville pride from Harry Chen saying Markville sweep. I guess Jennifer saying asks a question, how would you answer questions if the judge asks a question using a word you don't know? That's a very good question.
I think one of the best things to do is try to understand the context of the question. So if they're asking about like something related to finances and you can understand that much from the question that they've asked, then just try to respond as best as you can, like explaining the financial situation. Or if they ask something about marketing, then try to explain the promotional situation. And often that should address most of the question, even if there's a word that you don't understand.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Angel.
Okay. Sorry, just something to buy you some time is to ask the judge to repeat the question.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you ask them to repeat the question, the judge actually will expand depending on who your judge is. And that might actually help you clarify.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Okay, so I believe that we're running out of time right now. This has been a lot of fun for all of us, and I think that we should probably wrap things up right now. Once again, if any of you guys have any questions throughout now to provincials or even after provincials to ICDC, please message any of us or email any of us. We're more than happy to talk and answer any of your questions. So I think that on that note, we're going to wrap things up right now.
Good luck.
Again. Yeah. Good luck, everyone.
Good luck.
Bye.
Okay.